Juju Watkins might be the best player in the country, but she ain't doing what Caitlin Clark is doing. She ain't captivating the whole country like she's doing. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to FanBuzz Weekly. I'm your host, Patrick, with my co-host, Will. We're breaking down the biggest stories and hottest takes in sports. But before we get started, we're doing another giveaway. We're just giving everything away. We're giving away a Ford Maverick Lariat truck. I don't know. Sounds fancy. It's another Ford. So if you guys missed the last one we did, we're doing another one. Make sure you tune in next week to find out how you can enter for a chance to win. Today, we're going to be talking about the WNBA, and we are mansplaining because the WNBA feels like it's not necessarily keeping pace with women's college basketball, at least recently. And I don't know if this is a Caitlin Clark effect. I'm not really sure, what you want to call it. I think WNBA ratings and attendance is up in general. But when you compare it to women's college basketball, it's not necessarily keeping up with that. So we're talking about maybe how we can sort of address that, how it can be fixed. How can the WNBA be more exciting? So, Will, I want to ask you, how would you fix the current WNBA model? And then how can the WNBA capitalize on the success of women's college basketball?
Yeah, I think it is definitely a really tough question because, it comes down to getting the best players, getting them to come early like the NBA does. It comes to paying them more. And obviously, NIL makes it even harder. Not like Caitlin Clark's going to lose her her sponsorships when she hits the league, but she's going to be going from making $1 million to a little more than $1 million. It's not like, I don't know, like an NFL player stepping from NIL money to being a top draft quarterback. And it's hard to get the money without getting viewership. So it's kind of like this self-fulfilling cycle. We've seen, I'm sure we're going to get into the social media comments. We saw some interesting suggestions. We saw one to place WNBA in the same season as NBA. I think that's a great call. Honestly, just like outside of NBA season, people aren't thinking basketball. It's probably easier to create it as a parallel instead of an alternative. We've seen the same thing happen with like alternate football leagues that go over the summer. We just don't think about football when it's July. And in a similar vein, we saw the suggestion of having WNBA games be right before NBA games, like the Sparks, right before the Lakers. I think that's the wrong way to approach it. I've never planned on sitting, you can count on one hand the times I've sat down for pregame coverage for a game. So I don't think that's going to just get Lakers fans to accidentally tune in. If anything, you should go right after, because I've definitely sat through more postgame coverage than I've ever intended to. And I feel like if it was another actual game that ends up being engaging, because these WNBA games are getting better. If you're sitting after a Lakers game, the game's over, you don't have much momentum to get up and do stuff, and all of a sudden 3-pointers are raining down. So you're probably going to stay wrapped up. That's more likely than getting someone to show up 3 hours early and knowingly commit to 6 hours of basketball. You got to con them into 6 hours of basketball.
Yeah, even when, I don't know if you watched Steph Curry against Sabrina Ionescu in that 3-point challenge, that was electric. That was awesome. And I think that kind of goes back to your point about marketing these stars. Like, that is a great way to market, like, hey, this girl can shoot. Like, we have shooters. We have girls who can do incredible things. But I think the problem is it's hard to market these girls when, 8 months out of the year, they have to go overseas to earn like more money because they're not getting paid enough. So maybe the simple solution is to pay them more. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the WNBA gives their players a smaller portion than NBA. I think I was reading that. But even Liz Cama just talked about the fact that we're overseas, dedicating our time there instead of doing things here, doing commercials, marketing ourselves. And then you look at Brittany Griner, the biggest story of her career is that she's detained in Russia. I think she was over there because she was playing over there. Like, how sad is that? And it feels kind of like baseball's whole Mike Trout situation where he's not marketable and he doesn't really try to market himself as much as maybe, someone else or Bryce Harper, whoever it may be. Like, I think it comes down to stuff like that. You need storylines. And right now, women's college basketball has all the storylines. Everyone's tuning in for Caitlin Clark to break this record, to go head to head with Angel Reese, or people are watching, Kim Mulkey for similar reasons. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's one simple solution. But I think it starts with the stars. We need reasons to tune in, much like, we watch the NBA for the stars.
I mean, the storylines thing, this could take care of itself. I mean, a rising tide lifts all ships. I think I said that in the last episode I was on too. But seriously, I mean, if these rivalries are kind of personal, like the Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark stuff from last year, there's no reason that should change when you change uniforms. So hopefully they can, bring the intensity, and then the new college rivalries bring more intensity. It could just be like there could be less to do than we think to make this an improved situation. I mean, the college game's popular, like we said. People aren't going to want to just stop following their best players. I mean, there's people that are followed because they're part of a big brand, but Caitlin Clark is not being watched because she's on Iowa. I don't think she's going to lose viewership when she leaves the Hawkeyes. No offense to Iowa. It's a cool program. But I think something that you guys talked about in the last Caitlin Clark episode is a big deal here, which is that the game is, I mean, these scores are crazy. We're seeing like 100 points routinely. Like the national championship was like 102 to 86 or something with Iowa and LSU. And I think that it's a great sign that the women's game is becoming its own thing instead of a version of the men's game with women. And what I mean by that is, like, people talk about, oh, we need to lower the hoops. No, the idea here isn't to get it being all about dunks and high flying. There's not going to be a Giannis of the women's game. There's just not. But there's so much pace and tactics and interesting passing and shooting. It's an alternative. It's a different way to watch basketball. Like, I love watching Olympic hockey, and ever since the men's professionals have not been able to play for the U.S., they're coming back, but they weren't able for a couple of years. I loved watching the women's team. It's a totally different brand. It's not about hard hitting and slap shots. It's about skating, movement, keeping the puck off balance. Like, it's a whole different game. So it gives you something different to watch that you're still going to enjoy. So I think the women's game is finding its own lane instead of trying to become a version of the men's game, but with women, because I feel like that's kind of a losing battle. I think providing something else that's uniquely interesting is the best way to go.
You mentioned things being personal, right? With Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. And I think about how the NBA is like the pettiest league in sports. Like, dudes are throwing shade left and right on social media. They are taking shots. Look at Draymond Green. I mean, he's a whole podcast dedicated to it. Like, maybe some of that in the WNBA would give us a reason to tune in more. Because that creates storylines. It's like, oh crap, this person's going against this person. Like, who knows what's going to happen? They were going at it. They got beef. Maybe a little bit of that. Make it personal. And then at the end of the day, you shake hands. You guys are two great competitors, whatever. I could definitely see that. We're going to respond to some social media comments about how to fix the WNBA. And before we get into that, it doesn't mean that the WNBA is broken. I think a lot of people have had thoughts about the WNBA over time. And like I said, ratings and attendance are up in general for the league. So it's not necessarily like it's a broken, system. But I mean, it is always a constant debate. We're going to start with one on Instagram from Damian Broderick, who I just looked this guy up. He has like 1.4 million followers on Instagram. I don't know who he is, what he does, but thank you, Damian. He says, lower the rim. It'll bring dunks into the game, making it more entertaining and high scoring. Will's already shaking his head here. I'm just going to chime in right now. I don't really see Juju Watkins doing like a windmill dunk. Caitlin Clark, certainly, I don't necessarily see that. And I think, like you just said, it doesn't need to be like the female version of the NBA. But I do think you need like a Caitlin Clark who can do things that have never been done in the league. Something that is different, something unique. When Brittany Griner was dunking at Baylor, I remember tuning in because I'm like, oh crap, like nobody dunks, but here she is dunking every game. Like things like that, I think are awesome. But I know you have thoughts on lowering the rim, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I don't understand why it would make it more competitive. I mean, it's getting lowered for everyone. It's not, harming. I mean, if one team has great bigs, I guess it erodes their advantage a little bit, or maybe it helps them offense. I don't know, but I don't think it's the right move. I mean, it's not going to become more exciting just because there's a dunk here and there. Like you said, it's not going to be the windmills. It's not going to be these crazy dunks, posterization. I think what could be cool is if you have, as part of All-Star festivities, a dunk contest on a 9 or 9.5 foot rim. I don't know how much people are talking about bringing it down, but also it would really mess with the shooters and it would kill any potential for this, like these Sabrina Steph exhibitions. Like if Sabrina has been shooting all year on a 9'6" hoop, she's going to miss everything on a 10-foot hoop. Not because she can't, not because she won't have the strength, but just because muscle memory and the arc that you work on. No chance. Makes no sense to me. Like I said, I think that's an attempt to try and be a second iteration of the men's game. And I think the women's game is becoming its own interesting thing, which is working on a 10-foot hoop.
Like, players would definitely hate that and push back on that, right? For the same reason that you just said, like, now they have to adjust to a whole new, rim. Like, who, like, why would anyone want that in the league? Like, no. We got another one from on Instagram. Comedian Marvin H1, did not look him up. I don't know how many followers he has. He says, strongly, all caps, suggests that more women attend WNBA games. I think there's some validity here in that. I think the league needs to, like, get these girls when they're young. I feel like I've seen this with MLB. They really try to go into, like, neighborhoods, into the youth, like, really try to, like, hey, here's baseball. It's awesome. Play it. And I think if more girls are playing basketball, they're going to grow up to be WNBA fans. I'm not saying that's an easy task to, like, go across every city, in America and, infiltrate, if that's the right word. But I think that's a smart way to get women interested, is get them when they're girls, man. How many times do you, like, I don't know. I watch baseball still, and I know I keep going back to this, and I reminisce when I was a little kid and the people I watched, the teams that I saw. And there is some of that when you watch sports. I think there's a lot of reminiscing, for better or for worse. But what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I think this one has a lot more merit to it. This one makes a ton of sense. And, like, I've heard a lot of women talk about football. It's like it's hard for me to get into it because, like, I never had the chance to play it. And that's definitely, I understand that part of why I love football is the depth that I got from playing for 7 years. But with basketball, obviously women do have the opportunity to play it. And I do think that, watching people play the sport that you grew up playing is a huge deal. So I don't know exactly how the WNBA can drum up more support in the youth, but I do think that starting in that angle would definitely be a good place. I mean, if you grow up playing, you're going to want to watch the best of the best doing it. So I don't see how that wouldn't be successful, at least in terms of on TV viewership. I don't know how that would impact stadium or arena viewership. Right.
Well, I think that would come down to, how close is a team to me, right? Because if it's 6 hours away, I'm sorry, I don't have time to get there after work. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right, man. If you play a sport, you're going to end up watching it, and I think you can sort of appreciate it from a different perspective. All right, moving on to our last comment. This is from TikTok. Yes, we're on TikTok. Go follow us if you're not. This is from @70s born, 80s, 90s bred. All right. Move the WNBA to coincide the NBA season. Play the games a few hours before the NBA games. More people will tune in 3 hours early to a Lakers game than will tune in at all to a Sparks game. More TVs equal more revenue. The same applies to seats in stadium. Well, I know you talked about this at the beginning here, so I'll let you take this.
Yeah, I mean, like I talked about, like I compared it to the USFL. No one is watching. I don't care about football in the summer. Sometimes I watch Canadian football because I think it's interesting. And this goes back to what I was saying. CFL, I don't care about it because it's in the summer. I care about it because it's different, and it's another way to approach the game. And obviously, women's basketball isn't that drastically different, where there's a different size field and different numbers of players and less downs and stuff. But seriously, I don't think that putting basketball in the summer is necessarily the way to get people engaged with it. People aren't thinking about basketball. For me, baseball season. And like I said, pairing it with like NBA games, I think it's a good way to go. But I would go after games rather than before. It's just, I think that people are more willing to sit down for 6 hours of basketball than they think, but pitching it to them that way might be setting yourself up for failure. I think, I've been watching basketball. I'm having fun. I'm going to watch more basketball, and getting them hooked is much more of an efficient way to do it. I think that's like the March Madness theory, where you sit down for the first game of the day on Saturday, and then all of a sudden you're watching Princeton play Purdue, and you're just deeply invested in your 9th hour of watching. So something like that could work well.
But even with March Madness, like I could sit there and watch 24 hours of basketball, but I know it is a sprint, and it's how many weeks is March Madness, right? Like, and especially those first couple of days, that's when it all is happening and it's constant. But I'm just imagining an entire season where it's like I'm being asked to watch 6 hours of basketball, women or men. Who's got time? I'm not going to sit down for that long. Maybe some fans are out there.
I'm with you, but I mean, basketball is not my single favorite sport. It's football or baseball, and I have sat down at noon to watch Michigan and found myself not moving until Pac-12 After Dark is over. And I've watched the Yankees play at noon, and then all of a sudden it's Sunday Night Baseball and it's Dodgers Giants. I think that, I mean, Patrick, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like you're a big baseball guy too. You love your Gators. You're very similar to me in that way. I think that if it's the sport you truly, truly love, and there are so many people who truly love basketball, I wish Tyler was here because It's in the Indiana blood for some reason. But I do think if you truly love basketball, 2 games back-to-back or even a full day, it's not a crazy proposition if you've got the time.
I mean, I can see that. I also think there might be something to about like where these teams are. So I'm in Austin, and the only pro team we have is soccer. We have Austin FC. People love it. Like I just went to a game, their opener, I think it was Saturday night. It was awesome. It is electric. People are chanting things that I don't even know like what's going on. And I think if you go to a city where they don't really have any pro sports teams, or maybe they have whatever, 1, 2, whatever, like maybe fans will cling to that more because there's a lot more pride in that.
I think there's something to be said there. I mean, you've seen hockey do it, like where every North Carolina team's in Charlotte, the Canes are in Raleigh. People love going to Canes. This was done unintentionally with football in the 1920s, but I think part of the reason the Packers have such a fervent fandom is because it's the only thing, sports or otherwise, in Green Bay. No shade to Green Bay. I love fishing, Door County. But seriously, it's like it absorbs everyone there because it's what they've got. And just coming into New York, like for the Liberty, coming into New York and trying to compete with the Knicks and the Nets for viewership is really hard. Competing with the Knicks for viewership. No one's worried about the Nets, but got to throw Nets shade anytime basketball comes up. But seriously, I think you're onto something there. There's so many underserved sports markets in the U.S. that could be really, really into it. Like talking about soccer, Portland has gotten way into MLS and women's soccer because all they have is the Blazers, and it's the Pacific Northwest been great for soccer for that reason. So I think you're definitely onto something. Hit some markets that maybe don't have an NBA team, but still do love basketball.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at WNBA, if the commissioner is watching, bring it to Austin. I'll go. I'll go watch. Hopefully we get, an Angel Reese or Juju or Caitlin Clark. Well, if she goes to Indiana, we'll see. But that's going to do it for us today. I want to ask what you guys think in the comments. How can the WNBA be fixed, addressed, fixed, whatever you want to call it? What can make it more exciting? And if you like the show, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for new episodes. You can also listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn. I don't know. I'm not sure where everyone gets their podcasts. And don't forget to check out our newsletter. That's there as well. The link is in the description. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you, guys.